Hello, welcome to this afternoon's session. I'm delighted to be sharing with you something that is, I think, something that we're all looking at here, which is learning implementation. But specifically for this session, it's about learning implementation at scale. I'm Sarah Ratcliffe. I'm here to make sure that you all get the most out of our great panel here, so you can squeeze them for all the information that you want, because they are here, and we will be having a great Q&A session towards the end. So just starting with the panel here, we've got Simon Brown here from Novartis. Simon is a well-seasoned speaker at Learning Technologies, so it's great to have him on this session. He's also the author of The Curiosity Advantage, so I can tell you now, he absolutely wants you to be really curious and ask lots of questions, definitely. And Simon's flown in for the event as well, so we're really lucky to have him here. We've also got Rohit, who has travelled all the way from India. And Rohit, they've got a great catchline. So Rohit works for Yum and looks after the global learning implementation of Pizza Hut. Rohit, just tell me, what's the catchphrase? Because I just thought it was delicious. And just after lunch, you're going to really like this, I promise.
So it's called Alone We Are Delicious, Together We Are Yum.
So I think that's applying to us. Alone we are delicious, but together we are yum. I love that. So he's going to share with you the work that he does across the whole of Pizza Hut globally, which of course is bringing in together so many different countries, different languages, different cultures. So we're going to talk all about that this afternoon. And Jess has been already educating me today. So we've got Jess Staker here, and she's from Rentokil. And actually, I was brought up on a farm, so the Rentokil man would come out and deal with things at the farm. And Jess has been telling me some of the bigger picture that Rentokil have been looking at. And what Jess is really passionate about is the research that Rentokil does that then enables her to better inform the learning implementation that happens. So how does that sound as a panel? I think we've got a pretty great panel here. Would you agree? Yes, that's what we want to hear. We've just had lunch, so we want to make sure that we absolutely get the most out of this. Now, what I thought was interesting was when we look at kind of what the topic is for this session, we talk about it being internationally at scale. But what does that actually mean? So I'd just like to explore with the panel what that means for them, because we need to be putting it into context and then work out how we can go away and use some of the things that we learned today or have that discussion. So Simon, what does that mean for you?
Yep, so for us in Novartis, so we're a focused medicines company headquartered in Switzerland, but we operate in 100 countries around the world with 105,000 people. And those people may be in manufacturing, working in a manufacturing site. They may be deep expert scientists working in research and development. They may be salespeople out in the field a long way from any office, or all of the support functions of HR, IT, etc. So how do we manage that across 105,000 people in 17 languages in 100 countries? That's what scale means for me.
It's fair to say that's fairly complex. Would you all agree? The smiles are saying, yeah, that's fairly complex. Rohit?
Okay, in our case, if I talk specifically about Yum, per se, it would be about 850,000 learners. And if I scale it down just to Pizza Hut, we are about 120,000 learners, available in about 106 countries and about 32 plus languages, and variety of cultures and people and stuff. So that's the scale we are working on.
Thank you. It's a lot to think about, isn't it? There's a lot of things that we're pulling together here. And Jess, what does that mean for yourselves?
Yeah, so I thought we were a big company until I spoke to you. So we're about 55,000 people over, I think, 86 countries now. So expanding pretty quickly. With Rentokil, we have multiple different businesses, so that can go to pest control, as you may already know, but we've also got hygiene businesses and well-being businesses as well. We do a wide variety of things across our company, so lots of different markets to tackle. And yeah, multiple different languages as well, which is a big hot topic with us. So,
hot topic, yes.
Yeah, that's us.
So I'm curious now, did you all know that Rentokil did all of that? Or were you just thinking about the pest control? Look at that, see, it wasn't just me. I thought, wow, Rentokil, these companies are expanding, and it's good to be able to share that.
We have a coffee business as well, a little insight to us. We have a coffee business.
And pest control.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We do a wide variety of things.
Is there a catchphrase for that?
Oh, not for the coffee business.
Okay. Well, we've got a series of questions which we think will be interesting for you. We're going to explore this together, but remember, we will have that time for those questions. So it's fair to say that we know it's huge. It really is huge. So at the starting point, so perhaps someone's just started in a position that's thinking, right, we need to really think about our large-scale learning implementation. What do you think are the key factors when it comes to delivering learning on a global scale? And I'm going to ask Rohit if you can lead on that, please.
Yeah, so I think from a large-scale implementation perspective, a lot depends on the learners, the content, and the infrastructure. So I'll probably deep dive into all three aspects. In fact, the learner aspect connects to both infrastructure and content. So from a content perspective, right from translation to how you create content, the cultural diversity which you need to bring in to the content, and the contextual setting for the learner. So for example, we being in the restaurant business, we need to have the correct context in all our training that we design. So say, for example, if the equipment is different, the smallwares or the things that we use in the kitchen are different, so you can't have that backdrop in the content, so it has to change. Then talking about translation, while generative AI is coming up very fast, but from a translation perspective, you still need a human to go in and check and ensure that the translation has happened correctly. You can't rely on, say, a Google Translate or anything like that, because the whole essence of the content may change.
Yeah.
Coming to infrastructure right from what is available to with your learners, so like your device that you are using, say a laptop or a mobile device, to the infrastructure available in your organization. So how can you integrate with other systems, so like single sign-on or say the kind of bandwidth which is required. In fact, if I can say, in one of our markets, bandwidth is a problem. So so streaming content just falls flat. So all of these things play a vital role when you are designing the whole implementation and how you want to go about it.
Yeah, thank you. And Simon, what about yourself?
Yeah, so all of that, absolutely. And then I guess a build on that would probably be also data. So how do you then get consistent data around what it is that you're rolling out? So whether that's on usage data or impact data. So that would be another piece. Also then some of the complexities of that from a country perspective. So if you're rolling something out to China, actually does the system work in China with the Great Firewall, et cetera? So there's some other regional complexities that are in there at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely huge. Jess, have you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what you've both said. I think especially about the localization within countries, it's very important for us as a business to make sure that our colleagues are seeing people within their own businesses and making sure that they recognize that. As I said, we've got loads of different businesses, so we tailor our content and development based on each of the individual businesses to make sure that they are seeing what they need to see and all the right information as well. So no, you've both answered it great.
And is that sort of thinking about localization? One thing I want to ask is how you do that and how you make that happen. But also, are you thinking about that language from each of the different businesses in terms of, do they have a different tone of voice, all those sorts of things?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. For us, we want to make sure the branding is very heavily involved in all of the things we do, just to kind of bring a sense of belonging for our colleagues.
Okay.
So our platform is very much, or our LMS, I should say, is very much split within our businesses to make sure that they've got all their recognizable branding, and so they're all very aware of this is who they are as a company, and we're all in it together. When it comes to translations, again, yes, it is split between our businesses purely because the context is different.
Yeah.
So for a pest technician, the context may be completely different to someone who services washrooms. So having that comparison and making sure that those translations are correct is very important to us to make sure that the work is being received well.
Yeah, and how do you make sure that localization happens? I know this is something that you and I were talking about, Rohit.
Yeah. So in our case, we try to ensure that the authoring tool that we are using is applicable and is available with all our franchisees across the markets, because not every franchisee can spend that money on getting a vendor to do it. So how easy it is to export content out and get it translated. So a number of our franchisees translate in-house because the subject matter expertise is in-house. They have people who speak the native language, so it becomes easier. So it's basically around the authoring tool that you are going to use.
Okay, lovely, thank you. So we've talked a little bit, or we've touched on some of the needs that you might have in order to make all this happen once you've considered all these factors. So what would you say that the minimum system needs are for delivery at this level? And if I can come over to you first, Simon.
Yeah, so I think for me there's a few pieces in there. So there's one, having a single system that can actually cover everything. Sounds straightforward, but if we go back 10 years, we had 14 different learning management systems, 7 different talent systems, and it took us 5 years to get that all consolidated down to a single platform. So just saying one system that covers everyone is not an easy task in itself. And then that system needs to then have enough data in it to actually understand who's there. Some of that data may be available in the core HR system, some of that may not. But if you're rolling something out, you want to make sure it's actually reaching the right people. So certain things is straightforward. Compliance training needs to go to everyone, needs to be in 17 languages, and ideally we'll have some element where it can be tailored if there's some role-specific pieces. But for a lot of things, maybe we only need to roll it out to people who are office-based, or maybe it only needs to go out to people of a certain grade and above. Or so ideally then the system will have the metadata in there that you can actually start to segment the audience. Otherwise you're pushing out potentially hours of training which add up to huge numbers of money of people's time when you roll it out to 100,000 people, if actually most of them don't do that. And I think that's something certainly I found when you're working with stakeholders, people don't realize the complexity there. So it's like, we need to roll out this training on safe use of a laptop. It needs to go to everyone, mandate it, and seems straightforward, but then it's like, well, but actually we've got 30,000 people in a manufacturing plant who don't have laptops. And actually our sales force have iPads, not laptops. So it's not everybody. And then, okay, so who is it within that? And that's where having that data in the system hopefully means you can start to target the right people. Then there's language piece, so the system ideally will have an ability to be in the language and manage content in different languages. Then there's tracking piece that we talked about before, so can I track who's actually done the content? Ideally, can I track other data around it? Have they completed it? Are there skills assessments and things off the back of that? So different levels of sophistication. And then there's back to sort of a country piece of actually, does the system perform well in all countries, and is it a platform that people use, or do you need to have something like WeChat in China, because actually that's the preferred way that people access content there. So I guess a bunch of different requirements from the system to be able to make sure that it works.
So it's like really starting big and thinking, can it do everything we need, but then actually then filtering it right down to each of those individuals that are going to access that learning and how they're then going to use it. And being that sense check, isn't it, for the stakeholders to make sure.
And when you're looking at that, also the reuse within that as well. So from a learning experience platform perspective, can you sort of chunk things up so that actually people in different countries can access content? We had a good example in the UK recently where we'd built something in the US, and actually because it was in a learning experience platform and tagged, the UK was able to go in and use 80% of what pre-existed in the US. If we hadn't got that global platform with the right tagging, that reuse piece, you'd just end up building it all over again and waste a whole bunch of time and money. So the right platform with the right tagging to find things means then you can start to globally reuse things.
Yeah, and that time obviously is key. It's money. Just thinking about somebody that might be stepping into, I suppose, where you were that 5 years when you had the 14 different platforms, what would you say to someone that was starting out and looking for something that could do all of that? Because that's big.
Good luck on the 5-year journey. No, I mean, things have come on an awful lot from where we were there. So there are now robust platforms there that can do a lot of the work, and particularly on things like the tagging, the advances within AI, you can start to automatically tag content, you can chunk up content. There's a lot more sophistication there. We were doing a lot of manual going through 400,000 courses in just one of those platforms. So it starts to be a huge manual effort, which is why it took 5 years. But I think a lot of that now can probably be fast-tracked through with some of the AI tools that are available to be able to understand, tag, upload content, chunk it up, etc. And downstairs, hearing some of the latest things today and yesterday, there's some pretty sophisticated things there now that will be able to take away a lot of that heavy lifting. So
if only you had that then.
would have been nice. Yes.
Okay. What about yourselves? Jess, come over to you next.
I think for us, we've always said, start with too much and bring it back down. With a lot of the work that we've been doing when we were sort of investigating all the data and everything, we put pretty much everything into the system. So we had way more than we actually needed, but we didn't know if that could be useful in the future. So we started with too much and then restrained it to make sure that we could get the most value out of the data that we provided.
Okay,
so that's what I would say with that.
Thank you. And Rohit?
So in fact, I would say content is one of the biggest pitfalls in such a
Anyone agree with that?
Such a big implementation. So like our journey started in 2008-9 with an LCMS where we uploaded all our standards content. So in a Pizza Hut restaurant or any restaurant, you have certain standards or recipes to make the product. So we started digitizing. Those were on big folders kept in a store manager's office to be referenced, and it was a very difficult task. We moved on to an LCMS, digitized everything, but over the years, so much content got created. Nobody has the time and the will to get into that kind of content and basically check it all out. So it has been a journey. So content is one of the biggest thing. And I think all these platforms, they need a lot of love and care and understanding from us as leaders of learning technology and L&D professionals. We need to know our systems well and understand their full potential, what all things are possible, what are not possible. So I'd leave it at that.
I would agree, absolutely. So thinking about that, thinking about the size, and think about what Simon was saying then about the individual, how can you create meaningful learning with that personalisation just in time at this sort of scale? How do we do that? Who wants to take the lead on that one?
Yeah, I can kick
Go
us
on,
off. So again, I think I'll come back to technology there to help us. So whether that's at a content level or a learning path level, in order to get that personalization. So at a granular level, a content level, so if we look at our enterprise compliance training, so we do about 2.5 hours a year of things like data security and ethics, etc. Has to go out to everybody, so it has to be built in multiple languages. But some people will know the content, some people won't know the content, and if you put someone through an hour of mandatory content across the company, it's about 7 million of lost salary time. So the cost of just 1 hour of training, it's invisible cost, but it's there. So actually minimizing that down to be the shortest amount of time to actually have the smallest opportunity cost. So what we started doing a lot of those trainings is test out at the beginning. So actually ask you 5-10 questions around the nature of the content. If you get those right, unless something's changed, then done, you don't need to go through the rest of the content. So that gives an element of personalization at the course level. It's also super helpful from a motivation perspective, because most people go into these training thinking, I know this, why have I got to do this again? Then they do the test and it's like, oh, actually, I don't know that. Okay, now I'll pay attention and put in the 15 minutes to learn what I need to learn. So that's, I guess, at the content level. And then when you move up to the learning path level, then that's where the AI sort of understands the role that someone is in, the skills that people have, the content that we have in the system, and then can generate learning paths and recommendations. So that way you're getting personalization based upon what that person has specified are the skills that they want, what they've already completed, what it knows about language requirements and all those other pieces, and then the learning experience platform can be serving up what is the best learning for that person in that role.
Yeah, and when you were speaking there, definitely from that motivational point of view, because that's the one really quick way that we can turn off our learners, isn't it? By putting them through some of this stuff that they know the content of. But in terms of talking about the numbers in lost time, that's going to be a powerful tool for stakeholders, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's why there's a constant pressure to try and get anything that is mandatory enterprise-wide down to the absolute minimum amount of time. We took it from about 3.5 hours down to 2.5 hours. We're continuing to try and get that down to as shorter amount as possible in order to be able to get the main messages across. So.
Definitely, definitely. What about you, Rohit?
So I think I can add another dimension to this just-in-time learning. So what we are doing in our stores is the team member does not need to tell what he does not know or he or she does not know. So what we are thinking, what we are piloting right now is all our systems are listening, right? Our operational systems are listening what the customer is saying, what the, say, a store auditor is saying. So we have third-party audits who come and check the stores. We have customers sharing their feedback on how was the service, how was the food quality. Those opportunities can be I think granularly go down till the store, so you know which store has got that opportunity. And based on that opportunity, we can surface relevant trainings to those learners. So generally, it so happens that something has happened in one of your stores. What used to happen was, or it's a general tendency of knee-jerk reaction, okay, everybody has to do this. Instead of that, we are going absolutely pinpoint like a surgical strike, saying, okay, this is the store, this is the group of people who were making the pizza, the back of the house, the dough masters and all. And then you can surface trainings specifically to them. If the pizza did not reach on time, then you certainly know there is a speed of service issue. So you target either the delivery riders or the person who's dispatching the pizza. So we are going, picking up KPIs from our operational systems, listening to them, and then surfacing relevant training to our team members.
That seems a very sensible way to go. Really sort of using that data, and we're going to come to data in a moment. But on this topic, I just want to find out from Jess, because with Rentokil having so many different facets to the organisation, how do you tackle it?
It is, as you said, and I know we're going to talk about data later, but it is, everything is revolved around data. We want to make sure that only the relevant people are getting the relevant training. There's no point in our sense of a pest technician doing some training in hygiene, because it's just not the role that they're in. So unless they have an aspiration or a career path to go into a different business, we tend to make sure that our training is just available for those who actually require it. We then extend that further into giving the availability of managerial training for managers, but also people who are aiming to go into those roles, and just making sure that we cap that information so that it's not clogging up someone's feed. It's making sure that the relevant people are seeing the relevant content and they're not distracted by things that potentially have absolutely no impact in their career. But then again, we start using things like skills and making sure that we're setting out those career paths and using AI to determine what could be important to something and what could help someone's career grow. So I guess it's a mix of both of yours, really, and our hot topic, data.
Yes, so I'm definitely getting the impression here that the panel want to talk about data. So if we think about large-scale learning implementation, what role does that data play? Who wants to go first? Jess, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can touch on it.
I want to talk about data.
I love data. So for us, data is so important to make sure that we're actually getting something out of it. There is no point of training someone to have absolutely no information about how well they're doing. We report very heavily. We want to make sure that the content we're producing is the right content and the most important content to help them. With pest control, majority of it needs to be how a technician is to do something, how the technician is to install something, and that is very important, but we need to make sure that we can track that to know if there was a mistake, if something did happen that wasn't correct, we can make sure that they've done all their relevant training for auditing purposes. Again, this extends to managerial staff, making sure that they're learning the correct information to help them with their career. They're helping their staff with their career, but having the trackability of that is so important to our business to help us understand what we can be doing better and what is working well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that's giving you the information, that's telling you the story, gaining the understanding, so you can go and actually then personalise that learning. So
Yeah,
to
we need to have that
definitely
story
work
to
in
determine
tandem.
what
Definitely.
works and what doesn't.
Yeah, thank you. Rohit, how does data play in
I think data plays a very important role, and not the scale of data. Suddenly, everybody wants data to make sense, but very few people can make sense out of it.
Absolutely.
So we recently shifted to a new LMS. I know some of my learning partners are here from Learning Pool, so they helped us get onto an LRS, and we connected it to a BI system for us to be able to make sense of that data.
Yeah.
So right now, we are getting data at a global level, and then we granularly go down to each business unit level, then further to the country, to the franchisee, and exactly to the store, to the last man standing kind of situation. So data plays a very important role for people to know what's happening in the store, what's happening with the business, and what doesn't get measured does not get done. So you need data to do something about it. So.
Yeah, I really like how that you said that it's informing everybody, which it should enable then stakeholders to all work together more coherently to develop everybody, really.
Yeah.
Thank you. Simon? Data.
Yeah, so where to start? So for me, data is at the heart of everything, but it's not just data, it's then how do you get the insights from that data. So we've looked back over the last couple of years and been focused on what we call our skills operating system. So how do you create the technology architecture so that you can actually get the data from all the different pieces? So that's the sort of learning experience platform, which is Eggcast, Gloat, which is our talent marketplace. So those two then talk to each other with common data, so common skills language between the two. Underneath that, then the learning management system of Cornerstone, and then all of that then interconnected, producing data, and then allowing us to be able to analyze that. So from that, then, and also then coming in from things like Coursera, we can get skills data, that feeds into it, and then we can look at the business data and start to see where things are having an impact. And by getting all of that together and then linking it to some of the HR data, we can then start to get some really interesting insights. So we see things like, for people who have done 10 or more hours of voluntary learning, there's then a drop-off in attrition. So if people are doing more learning that they choose, and it has to be voluntary, not mandatory, but that voluntary learning, then there's less chance that someone's going to leave the organization. So we've gathered the data from a learning perspective. We've had to get detailed enough to know mandatory learning, voluntary learning, et cetera, and then we can look at other sources like the data that exists within the wider HR piece, put those two together, and then start to get correlations to give us some of those insights. So you need the data first of all, but then you need the ability to query that and link it to other business metrics or HR metrics in order to then generate the insights as well. And then there's a whole operational excellence piece of when you get that data, you realize there's 1,000 courses over here that no one's accessed. There's 10,000 curricula that have been built that only have one person access it each year. So then we can start to actually clean up all of the stuff that's in there, which wasn't visible until you actually had the data and the consistent way of looking at it. So that will then take a whole load of effort out and noise out, which means it's easier to find things and can be more effective in what's actually there. So it all comes back to having that data, that tagging, that linking to skills, and that link to wider HR and other data.
Yeah, and the data really is giving us that ear to the business, isn't it? What's really going on and how we can move forward with it. Okay, so there's a lot to think about. We've got data that's informing how we do things and why we do things. Obviously, it's huge, so this is no easy feat. But what we'd really like to know here is about what can get in the way. Okay, what's going to get in the way of a real successful implementation? Because anyone that's working through this, they want to know what the watch-outs are. So, Jess, what's got in your way?
I'll say the inevitable time. Time gets in everybody's way. Making sure that you've got the time to do all the prep work beforehand. Do not underestimate how much it's going to take beforehand, because there's no point of launching something that perhaps isn't ready. Obviously, there's only so much we can do about time, but it is making sure that you prepare for that. Some things that we struggled with previously is what we've discussed about translations and pushing all of those things out. It's making sure that you've got the time to get that all prepared beforehand, because as I said, if you push something out that isn't going to be received well by an audience because it is in English and they speak Spanish only, you're not going to get anywhere because you're not going to get the buy-in to start with.
Yeah, I think that's really fair, isn't it? Putting that time and preparation in and thinking, Simon, so you said it took 5 years to move from the 14
Yep, to the one.
to the one.
Yep.
So, but you're reaping the benefits now.
Exactly. Yeah, no, but being able to do that then suddenly allows us to get common data, because before we had no clue what was going on because it was buried everywhere. So there's a lot of benefits in investing that time to get to a common platform. Yeah.
And it would be very easy to be faced with something like that and to want to rush at it and change it very quickly.
Yep.
So actually taking that time to get it right.
Taking
in the
a
first
step
place.
back, looking at the
Lovely.
bigger picture, looking at what the outcome's going to be, and then addressing and tackling the individual stages.
Yeah.
Because we also moved to a new platform last year,
Okay.
and it has taken a full 12 months to be able to get into a position where we think actually we can go back to business as normal now, and start implementing new things, because for 12 months we just didn't have the ability to do that whilst we were moving to a new system.
Yeah, I can understand that. Rohit, what gets in your way?
I think from a learning implementation perspective, a lot of things can come in way. Let's start with stakeholder management. Let's start with our learners. Have you piloted the system well? Have you taken all your stakeholders along in the journey? How well you know the system? So if you're implementing any system, you better be knowing all the tips and tricks of that system. If you are not convinced about a system, you just can't implement it at a global scale. And then if I talk about stakeholders, like time. We started in about 2019 mid, probably, when we started scouting for a new LMS, and we finally launched in 2021. We gave entire 2022 for it to stabilize, for people to get comfortable with it without pushing out more changes. So I think it takes a lot of time and effort, but provided you are comfortable with the system. Have you tweaked the system well? Are you using it for your learners? So I would say learners are in the center of it. Keep learner in the center and do everything around them. And then I would say, what's in it for me? So for the learners, for the administrators who are going to use the system and run the system across the globe. So obviously, there won't be any one person handling everything. You will have a whole team. So what is the conviction of that team with that system is what I would say. And then obviously, a lot around tweaking. You need to be, again, I think I'm repeating myself, you need to love the system or embrace the system before your learners can embrace it.
Yeah, you're the ultimate role model in this, so you absolutely need to be modelling it and iterating it and you know, as you go along, definitely.
Yeah.
So lots to think about. Simon, I can't imagine much getting in your way, but what
There's a long list of things.
What are your key watch outs here?
I mean, there's so many things that get in the way. From the challenge of creating something once centrally that can then be deployed in 100 countries and in all of those languages, and doing that in a way that often, certainly with a lot of our product training, actually there may be small tweaks that are needed in country. So how do you build it once to a high quality, but also allow someone who may only have a quarter of a person in that country available as part of the training team to be able to then adapt that? So there's a real challenge between how do you build to a high quality, but also get it out so that it's editable and adaptable within country and people can change it. And we've not nailed that one. That's a challenge that we're still wrestling with on how you do that. I think how do you do things quickly enough and get all the stakeholders involved, signed off, and get it out so that people don't just get on with it and build their own thing, which is understandable. If at a global level you can't do it quickly enough, so how do you wrestle with that speed of getting all the right people to agree it, but at the same time do it fast enough that people believe it's going to be there and get it in time? So lots of different pieces around sort of speed and complexity of being able to scale things across the organization quickly.
Yeah, and I think whilst it's not ideal, there is actually a little bit of reassurance in that, because I think we're all facing these sorts of hindrances. Would you agree? Yeah, definitely. So, you know, that is reassuring in its own way. Okay, so I've got one last question here from me. Simon's laughing because he knows it's quite a big one. But I'm going to ask all of you guys first. What's the key overarching message that you've heard during the conference? What's that kind of, one of those things that, your key takeaway, what would it be? Anything that stood out for you? AI, that's the one. That's the one. So, we're thinking large-scale global implementation. What role does all the latest things in Gen AI play? And I can't even finish my sentence. Simon is itching to get off that seat. So what does it play in generative AI, Simon?
So it's, for me, I've been trying to sort of throw myself into this over the last month or so, and I probably have equal measures of excitement at the opportunity and terrified of some of the things that it will mean as well. But I think on the opportunity side, I think it's really exciting at how quickly things are going to be able to get produced. And downstairs seeing some of the vendors, and when I was talking to say, okay, show me how generative AI could produce a course on generative AI, which is something we're looking at the moment. How do we make sure everyone across the company knows what they can and can't do in it, sees the excitement, but knows the data security challenges, et cetera, around it. And typically, to get a program out to 100,000 people would take us 3 to 6 months, and we haven't got 3 to 6 months. We need to get it out, ASAP. And so we're saying, okay, how do we use generative AI to do that? So, example with this vendor downstairs, it was like, okay, show me, produce a course on generative AI. 10 minutes later, there's the introduction to what it is, questions on what it is, and it built the whole thing storyboard-wise. So literally from one prompt, and it may not have been perfect, but it's built the storyboard. You then, other vendors using AI down there, so you take that block of text, and I want a talking head video that explains it. Drop that in. There's a talking head video that looks pretty much like a person, and they're speaking the text that you got in there. And I want it in Chinese. Boom. There it is. Text in Chinese, video in Chinese. All of that in a fraction of the time, and that's without getting into the prompt engineering of I want to change this, improve on it, blah blah blah. So for me, it's going to massively cut down the amount of time it takes to create content. It's going to change hugely our role, and even then, when we think about content, it's going to transform what actually content is as well. Because actually, many of these things maybe in the future aren't content. It's actually a conversation with an AI chatbot that's got the right guardrails and the right training on there. If anyone's been in and played with ChatGPT, the one I tried the other day on that, which blew my mind, was imagine you're a tutor, an experienced tutor, and I want to learn about, I want you to test me on my knowledge of business and entrepreneurship. On my answers, I want you to score me out of 10, I want you to tell me what I can do better, and then at the end, I want a conclusion. So literally one paragraph. It then, from that, turned into, I'm now a tutor, and it said, okay, what's the difference between a business plan and a business model? I put my answer in. 6 out of 10, not bad. What you missed out was blah, 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 blah. What are the principles of a lean startup? Okay, minimum viable product. 5 out of 10, you didn't cover this, 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 and this. And so it went through, scored my answers, gave me the feedback in the context of what I needed, and then at the end gave me a wrap-up of the things I need to do. And that was from one sentence that I put in. That would have probably taken us previously several months of coding to come up with something like that. I can do it from one sentence into ChatGPT, and it seemed pretty accurate. So I think this is going to really change how we think about content, how we produce things. There's an accuracy thing. We're going to need to have to look at what it produces and is it actually accurate. But as a starting point to that 2 months of building the storyboard and getting it all agreed, now do that in 10 minutes and refine it, and it's going to transform a huge amount. And then just translate it into Slovenian. Boom, done. There you go.
And I would agree with you entirely. Certainly, as a provider to global organizations, that's where my brain is going, is to how we can speed, streamline. And what was interesting to me as well is the accuracy of it and how much time can be saved. So then we can really apply our time where it really, really makes a difference. So
it's very
completely with you on that one. And so just out of curiosity, sorry, I just need to find out a little bit more, but you literally, you went downstairs, and in the time that you were just mooching around the exhibition hall, you were able to have...
Yeah, so there's several of the vendors are doing it down there. This was Aris, I think, and literally it was put in a prompt, and 10 minutes later, sort of because I didn't stay around, it was right, and there's the course, and in my email was, here's the outline, the storyboard, whatever. Area 9 have it with their technology. You put in a PowerPoint, and it will then create all of the questions and the pieces. They're working on that at the moment. So it generates the hard work of an instructional designer and a scriptwriter and all of these pieces, the AI is going to do all of that for us. Yeah. And then the image generation side, the audio generation side. I run a podcast, the Curious Advantage podcast, and we use ChatGPT to write the entire script, make it human, and then an AI voice to turn it into voice. And we ended up having a conversation with ChatGPT with real AI voice, and it had things like ums and ahs in there. It talked about its knowledge of us as authors that it had got from the internet and used as part of its answers. It's scary. If anyone's got 15 minutes, look at Curious Advantage podcast and the interview of ChatGPT, and it's quite mind-blowing.
I'll definitely be having a listen to that one, definitely. Thank you, Simon. I could literally just sit and talk about this all afternoon, but we haven't got all afternoon. Rohit, what about AI for Yum and Pizza Hut? Where do you think it's going to go?
Yeah, AI is, again, something which everybody is getting onto.
Yeah.
Seems like everybody is in that FOMO mode, and everyone wants to get onto the bandwagon. So let's see how AI comes in, but we are certainly thinking about can we bring in, say, some communication kind of things within the store where instead of touching a mobile device or doing anything with the device, instead you can talk to a device and get your answers, get your trainings. So just-in-time learning can have another spin using ChatGPT kind of thing. So that's what we are thinking about. Probably.
Definitely. Thank you. Jess, anything from yourself?
I think that'd be very similar to us, to see if you can get kind of on-the-go learning without having to use a mobile and using AI for that. But in the kind of area of content, it would be using AI to create the content that the business just don't have the capabilities to create. So we don't have expertise in every area of the business, but AI is essentially an expertise in everything. So it would be using the AI to create content that perhaps we can't, because we just don't have the people in the business who are able to do that. So creating that content and then getting the reviews within the team, because although AI isn't perfect at the moment, it will get there very quickly. It will become a lot cleverer within a very short amount of time. So utilizing it now and then expanding on it when it expands, because it will do scarily quickly.
Yeah, I would agree, and ultimately, human beings don't always get it right as well. So, I'm going to hand it over to you now. We've heard some really interesting stories. I'm sure that everyone now wants to go downstairs and see some of those demos that Simon was talking about. I think we've got a roving mic there at the back. So, I've got so many questions on this, and I could just sit and chat all afternoon. But it's about what you want to get out of this session. So in terms of your curiosity, what questions do we have? And who would you like to put them to? Just raise your hand. There's one there. And keep those hands coming.
Hi, this question is for anyone can answer. When it comes to implementation, how do you deal with the challenges of making sure that your programs, your courses are effectively communicated and that there's buy-in? Because I know you can do a beautiful course, beautiful program, but if you don't have the right communication or buy-in, it will fall flat.
Good question. So how are you communicating it?
We have to get the buy-in from senior managers to start with. We have to get it pushed down from the top, because if we just push it out without any communication with the leaders, no one's going to want to do anything, because they don't know who we are. They don't know who I am as a person. They don't know my team. If I push it out, they're not going to have a clue what the importance is. But making sure that we have that senior buy-in is so important, because they're going to listen if the email comes from the CEO. They're going to listen if the email comes from their senior managers. So it's just making sure that you have that buy-in from the top down. That's how we found everything works the best, if we get that first.
Yeah, seeing that coming from the top is really powerful in that role modelling. I also think it's about providing that with them, isn't it? So, what is in it for them? So, and speaking the language of the consumer at the end of it, I think that's going to give you a bigger leverage to getting that engagement. Anything else from the panel here?
We've been focusing on communication around curiosity. So within Novartis, our culture is around inspired, curious, and unbossed. And so the curious piece is very much around learning and encouraging people to learn. So we've had campaigns for the last few years around encouraging people to learn, knowing what learning is there. Those started out as Curiosity Month. So we had the whole month of September was dedicated to learning, with events that were managed at a local level to get people excited and at a global level, and a lot of communication and sort of campaigning around that. We've now moved that to being throughout the year, so it's interspersed throughout the year, and again, sort of communication at a local level. We've got people who've sort of signed up to a Curious community, which I think is sort of 15,000, 20,000 people that get notified of when all of those are, and then it's using lots of different channels, whether it's sort of global Yammer, whether it's local learning teams promoting, whether it's through comms teams. It varies depending upon what the need is, and then recommendation through the learning platforms to promote learning that's relevant for people as well. So it's never as straightforward as one would imagine of a single sort of email out to 105,000 people saying this course is available. That's just not possible to do that with language and all the other pieces. So yeah, it's finding the right channels, the right people to promote it, and managing it as a campaign.
I think campaign is the key word there, isn't it? Because it's that marketing of it really as well.
Yep, and then balancing that with everyone's getting inundated with too many messages as well. So figuring out which is the important one and how do you tie it in with comms and other pieces, so it's not all of these different learning campaigns coming on top of all the other messages that people are getting as well.
Yeah, good point, Simon, definitely. More questions? Thank you.
Hi. We are starting global implementation of LMS in 64 countries for frontline employees, and we are starting with global content. My worry is how to scale the approach once we open the gates for local content development, and how to get local teams on the board to apply a global standard of what the good content looks like, and how to approach the let's say, need analysis for what needs to be covered. Because I think that this is one of my main worries, how to ensure that we don't open up the gates for content dumping.
I can start if you like. So it's a really interesting one, because we've spent years refining down and trying to cut down the amount of content. And at the same time, we've now launched the Learning Experience platform, and we're encouraging people to put user-generated content in there and put more in. So you've got this sort of dilemma of trying to reduce the amount of stuff because there's too much there, and at the same time, encouraging people to share things and put it in. So we've gone with the approach that we encourage people to share that user-generated content, whether that's articles, podcasts, other things that they've learnt, and then we rely on the system to be able to manage that, to be able to surface the right things to the right people, or to let people find it. There's always then the risk that someone uploads something that they shouldn't, and then we've got the right safeguards in there that you can very quickly block something or report something if there's something in there that's inaccurate. So that's how we sort of try and manage that piece. And then back to the data bit, we then look at the data now to be able to see, okay, this content hasn't been accessed in a year or in 18 months, therefore let's archive it, and someone can shout and we'll bring it back out, but at least then we're starting to cleanse then, so there's not too much in there and there's not too much out of date. But that's the approach that we took, of encouraging that user-generated content, but making sure there's the safeguards in there to be able to block it or switch it off if there's a report on it.
Has that helped? Brilliant. Other questions? And I think what's also interesting, so yes, we're talking about large-scale learning implementation, but the key messages that we've heard this afternoon, they apply to all learning implementation, don't they? So what are the things that are concerning you? And what would you like to know more about? There's a couple, yes, the lady at the back, and then there's a couple at the front. We'll come to you, don't worry.
This is a question for Simon. So I work in the defence industry, and you mentioned that obviously there's a concern with ChatGPT and other AI systems when it comes to data that you don't necessarily want shared because it's in the public domain. Have you got any idea how you might be able to distinguish between the data that you might want to tag and put through those sort of filtering systems through AI, and then also the data that you wouldn't want to put out there, and how you might be able to come up with I guess like a hybrid solution, so you can still work efficiently, but also keep those things private?
Yeah, great question. So we're talking very closely with our data security team, our ethics team, to try and make sure we've got a pragmatic view around it that balances the super exciting opportunity, but also the risk around data. And in a way, the way we're starting to look at it is actually it's no different to today if you view it as an open public platform. So I wouldn't take confidential company information and put that on social media or on an open public platform. And as long as we have that mindset, I think, that actually ChatGPT perceive it as an open public platform, then as long as the things I'm putting in there are not things I would post out on the internet anyway, then it's probably okay. So using it to generate a compliance course, using it to generate a course on what is generative AI, there's nothing confidential about that, there's nothing sensitive about that, and therefore that's probably okay. But if I start putting formulas of drugs in there or whatever, then that's probably not okay. And if it's anything that we would treat as confidential information internally, then I wouldn't post that on a public website, so therefore I shouldn't be putting it into to ChatGPT. So I think a lot of the guidelines that we have are probably okay, but the piece that is different is people don't necessarily know that it's a public open platform and that it's going to potentially take that data. And I think it was Samsung that got caught out by that, where they put sensitive data in and ended up in the newspapers as a data breach as a result of it. So that's where I think the communication or the training is needed to say, this is the risk, treat it the same as an open public platform. If you wouldn't post it on the internet, don't put it into ChatGPT. However, you might ask on the internet, anyone got any suggestions on what goes in a generative AI course? And therefore, if you're comfortable doing that, then that's probably all right. So that's at the moment how we're working on it. But we are working very closely with our data security team to make that. And I don't think Brian's here, but Brian Murphy from Microsoft was in a session yesterday. He was sharing how actually within Microsoft, there's now the Microsoft Azure has essentially access to ChatGPT in a sort of safe environment. So for that company-specific stuff, do that in the safe environment within Microsoft, and then you've got all the normal firewalls and the protection around it. But for the public version of ChatGPT, just treat it as though it's the same as sticking something out on the internet, and if it would be okay to ask it on LinkedIn, then it's probably okay to do it on ChatGPT.
Great, thank you. There's a couple of ladies down here. Is it the lady in the white and the lady in front of her?
Hi, thank you for the session. Simon, my question is for you. It's about China. How did you manage the implementation in China? Do colleagues or employees in China, are they able to access the content? 'Cause that's my challenge.
Yep, so we can go into it in more detail if you like afterwards, but my understanding at the moment is we have got round all of the major challenges within China. So the learning management system and LXP are now working there, I believe, and the sort of major content catalogs are now working, but we've had challenges along the way as to either performance or accessibility, but my understanding at the moment is that that's all now pretty much resolved, but I can check with the team and make sure that is the case.
Thank you. So I have a question about translations and translation cost. Maybe a bit simple question, but I hear you guys, and it's for all of you. You are in the many countries and with many languages dealing, and of course, translation, if done by translation companies, can cost quite some money. I'm curious, how do you guys determine in which languages, for what kind of cost you do translations, and do you look on some return on investment, on people performances? So what's your strategy around that? Thank you.
So I can take that question. So on translation, what we do is, so as a global company, as a global team, what we do is we give out content, right? And when the translation comes, so first is English, and then we follow through how many people or how many learners we are impacting. So the first measure is what is the largest size of that particular language which it will impact. So we translate, I think, into top 5 languages which impact our learners. So it would be Spanish, Portuguese, Brazil, and then I think it's Mandarin and Indonesian something. So there are 4-5 languages that we translate into, and then we take help of our franchisees and their teams to do translation for the smaller languages. So obviously, you have to spend large number of dollars, so might as well spend on learners which get impacted more.
Jess, you were nodding away furiously there, so have you got anything to add to this?
Yeah, I'd agree. We do it based on customers, so the places that have the most customers are the countries or languages that we translate first. If we can train people who have a large population, it works out better than if you train people who only have a population of 100 people. So yeah, we do the same thing. We prioritize by number of customers and number of staff, and then the smaller languages we tend to do in-house. So because we have 86 countries, we do have a little bit of flexibility with we don't always have to go external. If it's like compliance courses or mandatory courses, we tend to go external because obviously the importance of that and making sure the translation is correct. But for things that need like more context, we tend to go internal to make sure that the context is there for translation, because pest control is a bit unique. So you've got to make sure that the language is correct to the business, otherwise things start not making sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In fact, I can if I can add, like I was talking earlier, you need to ensure what kind of authoring tool you are using. So is the authoring tool available with your teams across the world? So then it becomes easier. So like, for example, if you're using Articulate Storyline, you can easily export it to Word and then get the subject matter experts to translate. Then there are other technologies also available. So, but again, the choice is yours. So you have to make a conscious choice of making it easier for your teams and the learners to get the content as fast as possible.
Just a build as well on the technology piece that you mentioned. So a couple of years ago, we had digital training to sort of make everyone aware of data and digital and what it was, and most of that content was in essentially sort of web pages explaining different pieces. And to translate it all, it was going to be hundreds of thousands of pounds to do. And in the end, we took the view to say, actually, we're going to use Google Translate in that instance because it wasn't sensitive information. And then we're going to put something on there that says, you know, we'd rather invest the many hundreds of thousands of pounds in another clinical trial than we would in having perfect translation. So actually having 80% quality translation is probably good enough, and we'll put that money towards something that actually impacts patients and makes a difference, rather than having absolutely perfect translation of all of this. And it's probably going to change quite regularly anyway, so it will cost us even more to update it. So depending on the nature of what it is, we've taken that view sometimes to go maybe a bit more rough and ready, but explain why we're doing it, and hope people understand the rationale that it's not worth spending a huge amount of money on perfect translation in this area.
Brilliant, thank you. Some more questions there at the back?
Yes, thank you so much, and thank you for sharing how you analyze the needs to do translation and how many languages we need for each training. But my question today is, now we can do, for example, subtitles automatically with so many tools, but the only solution we have, for example, in my company to do the translation, a correct one, is going and paying agencies to do that for us. With all these new technologies that we see today in learning, we still don't have any tools that can do automatic translation for us.
So my understanding is there are companies that will specialize in that automatic translation, and there's certainly things like even Microsoft Teams will have automatic translation in there. So a lot of those Curiosity webinars that are mentioned as part of that campaign, we did those live through Microsoft Teams, and there was AI translation in there that put subtitles in 6 languages as people were talking in there. And back to the quality piece, it wasn't perfect. There's a few embarrassing errors that were in there. We had Lisa Bedell talking about killer questions, and it translated that as kill yourself, which was not great to have in the subtitles. But people can hopefully appreciate, it's live AI translation, and it's not going to be perfect. But so things like that, the technology is getting better. That was 3 years ago, I think, that we were doing that. So nowadays, I think it will constantly be improving. So my expectation is we will start to see those tools being used much more, but you may be using them already, I don't know.
You make a great point, actually. I think from a UI perspective, all these auto translations work very well. But when it comes to content, so say if you have put a SCOM course online on your LMS, it can't be translated off the shelf. It has to be, again, going into, say, a programming language and getting into that authoring tool and then translating. So I think it'll be interesting to see how generative AI does all of this in the future. But as of now, I think you need a human to go in and check, even if it has been done by something, you need somebody who speaks the native language to go and check the translation, and which makes it equally costly if you go directly for a person translation. So kind of. So let's see how generative AI does the trick for all of us.
Yes, let's hope so. Thank you very much.
Okay, gentleman at the front here, thank you.
Thank you, and great session. So this is a kind of what-if question. I don't know if this quite fits into the implementing at global scale, so it might be a bit left field. So you've been talking a lot about using AI and various different tools to kind of capture the low-hanging fruit, if you like. So the stuff that's publicly available, and you've also been talking about doing that with translation, is that the stuff that's easier to do, that doesn't require context and your individual context, you can do that with publicly available tools. So great. How are you going to make sure that your learners don't start perceiving this as a two-tier system? So they start going, yeah, this is stuff that's been generated, so I'm not going to care about that. And I'm actually only going to care about the stuff that is done, in inverted commas, properly by a real human. So how are you going to sort of challenge that two-tier system?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? Very interesting question. Who would like to?
I can start if you like. So I guess there's an assumption behind the question that we'll be able to tell the difference between the two. And I think the reality will be actually it's going to be an AI-generated solution with then human tailoring. That's where I would anticipate it would end up. So if I think of the examples that I've seen of where it's able to sort of generate a course and do all of these pieces, I would be very surprised if that is ready to go at that point. So I think what it will do is a whole load of the legwork of being able to figure out what the storyboard is, what the key points are, but I think then the role of us within learning will then be to add that final 20-30%, which then makes it feel like it's a human-produced course, if you like, at the end of it. So I hope there won't be a clear sort of gap between the two. If there are, it'll be interesting which one's the higher quality. But yeah, I hope it will come to actually, it's just helping us produce good content in a faster, much more agile way. But then it will also get us to the, and is content the answer, or actually is it going to enable all these other ways of us actually learning, where we need to shift our mindset that actually content in the way we think about it today is actually not necessarily the way that we end up doing a lot of learning, and it's more these personalized coaches that may be helping us with then bringing in videos and other clips from all sorts to give you what you need. So it'll be interesting to see how, as the technology develops, we then challenge ourselves to, rather than just take what we do today and allow us to do it faster, well, actually with this technology, what are all the new things that can actually allow us to do? And I think that will be super interesting. So, and that's a challenge for all of us to think that one through, of what are the opportunities this now creates. So.
Yeah, definitely.
I would agree entirely. I think making sure that if it is generated, that you're still going in and checking it, making sure that it's accurate to your business. And yeah, as you said, 30-40% is still going to need to be checked at this stage. Perhaps in 12 months, 24 months time, may be completely different, and you may be able to tell the difference, but I think at this point it would just be making sure that it's still correct for the context of the business.
I would just add, like, all the deep fakes that we see these days. We can't make out what's right, what's wrong, right? Very few people can make out the difference. I don't know whether our learners would be able to make out the difference between a completely AI-generated content or some bits and pieces added by somebody human. But I think the quality of it, the way it comes out, I think that's very important, and I agree to both of them that a person needs to see that content and what AI is saying. AI is not 100% correct, and we have seen a number of examples that it can do a lot of things, it can say a lot of things, and they also give a disclaimer saying, this may not be the right thing, what ChatGPT is saying. So, the
one that blew my mind this week is, I don't know if anyone's been down the road to the ABBA show. So that's CGI-generated ABBA back in the 1970s, and it's a stage show of them with holograms. And it's not real, it's holograms. And I was literally there going, they look absolutely real. I was looking for where's the light, where's the something going wrong. If I'd walked in there and not known, I would have said that was a band on stage and they were playing, and it's all CGI. It's blown up in 100 foot high on the wall in close up, and you couldn't tell that it was AI generated. It's like, wow, this is how we're going to be able to trust anything in the future. Yeah.
Crazy. Okay, so we're just going to wrap up here with a question that I want to pose to each of the panelists here that I'm hoping will help each and every one of you. So I would like you each individually to give me one piece of advice to anyone that's implementing anything large-scale, international. Jess?
I would just say don't underestimate the time and capacity it is going to take. No one's going to lie to you, it's going to take a while. But knowing that to start with, and setting out with that mindset that it may take a little bit longer than you anticipated will put you in a much, much better position than if you're going to rush it all. So that would be my one piece of advice.
Lovely. Be clear about those expectations. Rohit?
I would say keep the learner at the center of the entire implementation. Have a macro view, but don't miss out the finer details of the implementation. And stakeholder management, very important. Don't miss the pilot. If you were in yesterday's session of Kevin, be a Dexter. Look for, ask the right questions. Make sure you're not bulldozed into just producing or implementing just for the heck of it. So.
Yeah, I like that very much. And yeah. Simon?
You won't be surprised by mine. So I would say...
oh, I wonder what it could be.
So I would say be curious, that challenge the way we've always done it, actually, and look at some of these new methods to see, actually, is there a better way to how we've always done it? And, yeah, explore, experiment. I think there's going to be some very exciting new ways for us to actually get to our learners, whether it's the speed we do things or just the method by which we engage with learners. So be curious to try new things would be my advice.
Brilliant. And I'd like to say thank you for all of your curiosity this afternoon. And a big thank you to all the panelists, Simon, Rohit and Jess, who have taken their time with us. Enjoy the rest of the conference.